Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info, and welcome to Behind the Wall, the post-race show that comes on after the race. Welcome and to the conclusion of the Worth 400 at the Dover Motor Speedway, where unofficially, pending the results of post-race inspection, Denny Hamlin has scored yet another victory this season, sweeping the concrete tracks after his win during the tire war back at Bristol earlier this year. Tire wear not really an issue today with the warmer temperatures compared to what we saw in practice and qualifying. We'll talk more about the race itself as well as the battle for last place, which had two separate controversies really determine the finishing order here. We will talk about the Xfinity Series race as well. We'll do some trivia later tonight. Got something for show and tell, and we'll also preview the action at Kansas this next week, where I'll be doing my first trackside coverage of the season as we make preparations to cover the action out there. But we'll talk about the race first and foremost here. I'd say a pretty, at least a pretty interesting Dover race. I mean, again, little moments here along the way had big effects, certainly like William Byron falling off the jack at that one point there and never really getting back into contention, then ultimately being involved in that accident with Bubba Wallace there on the back straightaway. Very hard hits for both him, Wallace, and Christopher Bell in the incident back there. Nose damage to Martin Truex's car seemed to ruin what would have been another weekend sweep for the Truex family after Ryan's win in both last year and this year's races at Dover for the Xfinity Series. Truex coming very close here, but still finishing in the third spot there, despite the damage suffered to his car. Kyle Busch in fourth, Chase Elliott in fifth, continuing to ride the high tide after his win at Texas a couple weeks ago. Noah Gragson returning to form after his great run at Phoenix a couple of weeks ago. Gets another top 10 finish there, finishing in the sixth spot ahead of Ryan Blaney. Alex Bowman looked very good for portions of this race as well. I think Mike Joy was very right to bring up that tight battle off of pit road and how well he handled it to prevent getting any further damage to the 48 there. Left a little tire mark on the 11. That will, I'm sure, end up on the race-winning diecast there if post-race inspection holds serve there. Daniel Hemrick with a fine run there, finishing in the ninth spot there for the Colleague Racing effort. I think we've wondered what's been going on with that program in general, but both their cars, AJ Allmendinger coming out in the 13th spot there too. Fine run for both of them. I believe this was, if I remember correctly from the article this week, I think this was the 25th Dover start for Allmendinger in his career, so just a tremendous career that he's had at this track. Still hasn't won at it, but another solid finish there for him in a part-time effort there in the number 16, sharing that ride. But Hemrick, a great run for who I like to call Daniel Heartbreak for all the bad luck he's had in his career over the years in the Xfinity Series and even in the first part of his Cup career here. Great to see a fine showing out of him after a little bit of strategy came into play there with Ricky Stenhouse's accident late in the race that kind of jumbled up the order a little bit there. Ty Gibbs coming off with the 10th place finish. Looked like Ross Chastain was almost going to get in the top 10 there, but Gibbs was kind of charging through the field there in the closing laps and gets that spot. Tyler Reddick, the Talladega winner, finishing right behind him just outside the top 10 in the 11th spot. I say right behind him. Actually looking at the intervals here, it looks like 1.4 seconds between 10th and 11th. So the top 10 able to separate themselves a bit from the pack. Already hearing in some of the post-race interviews here some controversy over the use of air out there with the next-gen car. You would think after generations of not running the cars with the front valences that we would not hear the issue of dirty air or taking the air away from somebody behind you there being a factor in these finishes. But it was very evident there at the end of it there, where Larson had about 16 laps to really reel in Denny Hamlin and cut down the lead and got it down to within sight of him there at about 2 or 3 tenths, but it just couldn't get around him. Once Denny started changing his line, there was just nothing he can do, and he was just kind of staying behind him at the end. Apparently, Kyle Busch was pretty outspoken about this issue as well. Not sure what the solution is on this. Just chalk it up to another issue with the next-gen car or just how it races at certain tracks here. But I think in spite of the finish and Larson not being able to quite get up there and take the lead, I like that it wasn't, despite the fact that Hamlin dominated this race, it still seemed like he wasn't the clear front runner for a lot of this one still. It seemed like, whether it was going to be Larson or Truex or anybody else working their way through the field could really have a decent run out of this here. But regardless, Hamlin pulling off the victory here this time around. Looking through the rest of the running order here, with other drivers further back, 17 cars on the lead lap. Chris Buescher, the last of those. Daniel Suarez stuck in the first car, 1 lap down. I want to give a shout out to Corey Heim, who did a solid job under difficult circumstances, being the relief driver for Eric Jones. Certainly wishing the best for Jones on his week-to-week basis as he looks to heal from a lower vertebrae injury from that savage crash he had at Talladega last week. Certainly, again, wishing him the best and glad that he was able to be at the track and help out the team there and be interviewed during the broadcast there as well. Heim finishing in the 25th spot there in his car, 3 laps down. Held on to the lead lap for really most of the first half of the race there as well. And actually, speaking of Hemrick earlier, that was one of the interesting battles further back in the pack when they were battling to get the lucky dog, and Hemrick ultimately prevailing on that and able to capitalize on it there. Beautiful paint scheme, too. I don't know what Mike Joy's talking about where they're saying it's not a throwback scheme. I guess if it's not at Darlington, it doesn't count or something. But with all due respect to him on that, I think that running this paint scheme at Dover, 40 years after Richard Petty won in that paint scheme for his 199th victory, I think it's a very fitting throwback to that. I don't know if the Legacy Motor Club outwardly intended that to be the case or if it just worked out that way with the sponsorship. But it seemed more than coincidental that they were running what was very clearly the 84 scheme with that little detail there with the nose and where the white accents kind of fit in with the crest. That's kind of the way I took it to be on that there. So, yeah, I thought that was a beautiful paint scheme out there. I thought Corey did a fine job with it. Again, under difficult circumstances there, too. But again, 25th spot for him, 3 laps down. Zane Smith, another driver that found himself in the middle of a couple of incidents here. Not just the practice incident that shortened the rear end of his car, but the team, the Spire Motorsports effort, did a fine job getting that car patched back together. I thought that was going to be a backup for sure. But it turned out that was not the case. According to the broadcast, there was no frame damage to the number 71. So they were able to get that car fixed up and back out there, only to be involved in an accident there with the Bubba Wallace, Christopher Bell situation. I applaud NASCAR for showing the onboard cameras there on both Bubba Wallace and Zane Smith in that case. It seemed like both of them were just in each other's blind spots, really, coming off that corner. If you watch that clip kind of looped over and over again and try to watch it from either one of them individually, in both cases, it seemed like the other car just kind of came out of nowhere. And by the time they could respond at all, it was just a racing deal. I don't think it was anything that was either driver's fault in any case there. I know Zane's had a really rough start to this year driving that 71 car. And I think when a driver finds themselves in kind of one of these wait and see positions, I think about whether it was Ryan Preece running as the reserve driver for Rick Ware Racing, or if it was Clint Boyer driving for H. Scott when he was waiting for a seat over at Stewart Haas. Those could be really difficult years. And obviously with his development deal with Trackhouse and seeing what's going to happen with him, he's just going to have to just get as much track experience as he can in this car. And the last place finisher that he had at Bristol earlier this year with the incident there, it's just been a steep learning curve. And we're seeing with a lot of these younger drivers that run as regulars in the other series as well. Even John Hunter Nemechek, who has had some experience, not just from his full-time season back in 2020, when they were still running the Gen 6 car, but even the occasional starts for 2311 and other teams more recently. It's been a really difficult challenge for them too. Jimmy Johnson being top 5 in practice and finishing 5 laps down in the 28th spot there too. Another challenge there for even a driver that pretty much owns the keys to this place with all the wins that he scored there, including his 83rd and most recent Cup victory back in 2017. But Zane Smith, though, it's going to be a difficult stretch for him here. But hopefully in the second half of the season here, he can kind of figure things out and have something to build off of next year. But again, you hate to see anybody struggle, but even with the field pared down to 36 full-time teams, you're still going to have one or two at least that are going to be really struggling there. And that's definitely been the case right from the outset there for that 71 team. Further back in the order, Brad Keselowski finishes in the 30th spot, bounced off the outside wall at least once, did not bring out the caution flag there, ends up 17 laps down in the 30th spot. And this kind of leads us into our discussion of the last place battle here. Kaz Gralla was going to be in last place for a lot of this after Zane Smith climbed up from the last spot there. You had Kaz Gralla in a backup car after a very savage hit in practice, hitting the outside wall head on, coming off of turn 4. Glad to see him okay and be able to recalibrate with the team this weekend. They got their one backup car out there, unlike the Hendrick Motorsports teams that when they're backups, they have like wraps on both sides of the car, but kind of leave it as, whatever the undercoat color is on like the roof of it. This one here looked like they just had a plain flat black car, put some decals on it and got back out there as best they could. But there were real issues with that car being on top of the racetrack when the wheels sliding around through the corners. And that kept him well back of the field in the opening laps until we had Todd Gilliland spin about 27, or I guess it was 37 laps into the race there. 38 car spinning after the battle with Austin Dillon coming off of turn 4. Gilliland ends up with his car pointed the wrong direction. And much like what we saw with Joey Logano at Pocono last year, was completely stranded. What would have been a very ordinary incident with very minor damage, didn't have any serious damage to the body, but regardless, had pretty much all 4 tires flat and couldn't get back out there and being able to compete with the rest of the field there. Definitely a difficult situation there for Gilliland, and unfortunately a situation that also made the incident much more costly than it needed to be. As the crew said, very much so when he got back on pit road finally, he should have been maybe 2 laps down, not like 7 or 8 laps down, is what ultimately happened. So an unfortunate situation. I really don't get why NASCAR and the Steps Towing Company that's involved in, working with these cars. I mean, Steps really came into the sport here as like their official tow truck provider here in 2022. They made their debut over at the Clash, and they debuted that big cantilever system that they kind of strap onto the front wheels of these cars to be able to tow them around the track. But we saw very early in the season when we got to Fontana, and you had a lot of cars that were stranded on the apron when they had 1 or 2, flat tires and just couldn't limp the back around the track because of the way the underbody is designed and the strakes on the diffuser and so forth. And mentioning Joey Logano last summer, that's kind of really where that came to a head more than a year into the development of this. And Logano shouting at the crews there to actually tow him around the track, which they did, unfortunately, completely destroying the undercarriage of the car and really ending his race not too much longer after Daniel Suarez, who was involved in the same incident that happened in turn 1. This one here, a smaller track, but regardless, the result was the same. I don't know why we have not progressed in this sense here, where the tow trucks can't just put some kind of dolly underneath half the car and just be able to tow it around the track, or use a flatbed. I mean, has been suggested as well. I don't get why that's not an option. I think that we've had a lot of drivers that have been unnecessarily punished for having these issues here along the way, and Gilliland's the latest example of that. Is everything still working on here? I just want to double check here. I'm using a new outlet on here to hopefully not shake the screen as much in the meantime. So let me know if hopefully we haven't lost connection here. It looks like we're still doing good. Okay. But catching up on the Joey Logano situation there. Again, it was outrageous to happen. And I thought because it happened with one of the big teams out there, with Logano at the time being the defending series champion, that was going to get a lot more attention, but it just hasn't been the case. And I don't know what more needs to happen for NASCAR to step in or what's going on with this. So, it's just it's just been a ridiculous situation. And I hate that Gilliland had to pay the price for it, because in a race like this at Dover, where, the incident happens very early in the event, very minor damage, not a big particular deal there. But you lose a whole lot of laps and it completely takes you out of contention to do anything, really. Ends up finishing in the 31st spot, 21 laps down. At the end of this, I believe one of the last cars to finish, if not the last car, to finish under power in this race here. Just unnecessary. So I still think the dolly is the best option. If it needs to be something that's like a custom designed piece of equipment that could support the rear of the car, the weight of it, and keep the diffuser and the strakes of the diffuser off the track surface, then just come up with it. I'm sure they had to design something to have that cantilever system to hold the front of the car up, and they were very proud of showing that off back at the Clash when you had the first couple of incidents there, when it was like Eric Almirola having a crash in practice, or whatever mechanical issues were coming up during the event itself. But there's just been zero progress on this, at least not that we can see. And as Gilliland's crew expressed during this this whole situation, it's like, is this the first time we've experienced this? And he's like, no, of course not. So I don't know what needs to happen. I'm sure the teams are jumping on NASCAR about this as well. They should be, because it's outrageous and it's having a direct effect on the competition. Because yeah, having a flat tire or spinning out just when you're racing for position. I mean, Gilliland was aggressive racing Austin Dillon, but his crew is very clear to say, like, look, don't blame yourself for this. You were doing exactly what you were supposed to be doing, racing for position as hard as you could, trying to get the best performance you could out of the 38 car there, and, paid an unfair price. And I think that that's something that needs to be looked at for anybody, and it needs to be available at all the tracks. I mean, imagine if that happened last week at Talladega with the track being as big as it is, and, how hard it is to make it back to pit road there. It wouldn't be too different from the Pocono situation. So that's something that needs to be looked at. I'll be kind of interested to see if there's any more developments on that Kansas next week, where, yeah, again. And then on top of this, you have the added complication of the crash clock, where there was communication issues with Gilliland about, it's like, okay, well, they said if they hook us up to the tow truck, we're done for the day. Because we have seen situations where the tow truck, instead of stopping the car in its pit stall, they just tow them directly behind the wall, and then they're out of the race because that's part of the rule. So they got to be real particular about actually getting them to the pit stall and changing the tires. And I don't know whether the tow truck, crews are just not aware of these rules, or it's not getting communicated to them. I mean, we got NASCAR officials down there that are just kind of standing there and watching what's happening. You figured that somebody was going to clue somebody in on that. It's ridiculous. And it's this catch-22 with these rules. And, it's hard enough to get these teams out there to compete. They should have every chance as possible to keep competing if they can. They're already put in such a box with all these other restrictions there. They shouldn't have to pay such a minor, major penalty for a minor infraction there. But unfortunately, that's where Gilliland found himself, and he was last place for a good portion of the race after that, until we had the situation with Ryan Preece. And this stirs up the other major controversy from this race weekend. And this is, I think, a very serious matter that also came up in the Xfinity Series race yesterday. The subject of fire. We've talked about this a lot on the show here when criticizing the next-gen car in particular. I do think there's a lot of positives from the next-gen car. I'm not going to out and out say it's been a failure or anything. I think that's a bit extreme, but it does have a lot of recurring issues, and it's not entirely clear how these issues are being resolved. The problem of rubber buildup in the behind the front grille, and how when air circulating through the car caused fires in the cockpit. Then that was something that was being addressed. I think NBC did a decent, although belated, job in actually describing what was being done to actually fix these issues. But the issue of the foam burning in the doors has not been addressed, really, or at least not satisfactorily. You think about Ty Gibbs at the Clash last year, where they had to rip the entire right side of the car off, and revealing how much foam is in there. It's not the little blocks of it that were like segmented pieces like we had in the car tomorrow. It's an entire large piece form-fitted to the shape of the actual frame, the actual roll cage there, which hopefully has prevented any serious injuries and side-on impacts in these cars. However, there's something, or there's some situation, whether it's where the exhaust is or the wiring getting hot or something that is causing this foam to catch on fire. And we've seen some very extreme examples of this, such as the situation that Chris Buescher had at the Indianapolis road course, I believe 2 years ago, where, again, within the confines of the crash clock rule, the driver has to literally stay in a burning car while they spray fire retardant in there to actually put the fire out, and then send it back out there where he can't see anything because there's all the materials circulating in the cockpit there. That was, I think, a situation that NASCAR thankfully did take some attention to. That, as well as the situation that Kevin Harvick faced in the Southern 500, where the crappy parts meme began from that, but well regarded, because you can't have these situations where drivers are encountering fire. That shouldn't be acceptable at all in stock car racing, especially where it's a form of racing where it's not open cockpit, and you have to take a lot of steps to get out of the car. And, you got to make sure the window net drops. You got to make sure you can get out of your belts and you can unhook your radio and climb out of there. I think it should be more important than ever in this, regardless of how big the cockpit is or how easy it may be to get out of it. I think it should be treated very seriously. And I think through this whole controversy that has happened over these last couple of years, certainly the broadcast, I can say, I can't speak for the radio broadcast, but for the TV broadcast, have been very cavalier about this. And it's troubling to me because that's the kind of thing that can get out of control real quick. And we saw a situation yesterday in the Xfinity Series race, admittedly not with the next-gen car, but very much with fire getting into the cockpit, where a driver had to bail out of the car, with that being Ryan Sieg, very similar to the situation we saw with Jordan Anderson in the Truck Series. Now again, different situations there. They're not the next-gen car. We don't know if it was anything to do with the foam. It looked more like it maybe have been a fuel leak issue in that case. But again, the way that was shown in the broadcast, it was almost just, like you put it in the radio remix segment during the broadcast, or you don't really follow up on the situation, especially in Ryan Sieg's situation where that fire happened. He bails out of the car, almost gets pinched against the wall. He was very close. He stepped on the brake and he was some distance away from the inside wall, gets out of the car rolls away and nudges into the inside wall. He barely had time to get out of there. And I don't think that was really recognized for how dangerous it was. And then right after it, Blaine Perkins, he come back from commercial break, his teammate, Blaine Perkins, one of his 3 teammates, 29 car, has smoke billowing from it. And they didn't follow up on that at all. Frightening situation. And this continued really into today's broadcast as well. Ryan Preece has smoke coming out of his the right side of the car, very similar to the Ty Gibbs situation. And he's just trying to drive through it. Just hopefully it's not going to be a big deal. And the broadcast's like, oh, well, this is great. There's smoke in the car, but there's hoses that are hooked to his helmet, and that makes sure he gets fresh air. And then the smoke starts getting worse. And then it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. I mean, that system only works to a point, and especially if we're talking about how much smoke is in there, what's in the smoke. Is there an issue of radiant heat involved in this too? There's already issues of eliminating heat in the cockpit. Certainly a fire is not going to fix that situation. And then also, limiting, you're getting fresh air from outside the car, but the air inside the cockpit itself, that shouldn't be even in question. That should be, a really serious situation. And indeed, the situation did get worse. This was not as much shown in the broadcast, but over the radio about this issue seems to start about 20 laps in, and then about 60 laps into the race after the Gilliland restart. There were reports of just pieces of debris getting on the camera. They were the crew was remarking on this. I guess they were watching the NASCAR drive feed, and it switched over to that, and you could see, there's like little specks of debris. So there's actual ash and material coming out of this fire. So it's clearly getting worse. That stuff's floating around in the inside of the cockpit. It doesn't have anywhere else to go. So it's just an impossible situation. What was most damning about this is that it was shown on the camera. I had just enough time after I heard it on the radio to switch it over to NASCAR Drive and take a screenshot of it. Barely did that. And then the camera switched to the roof camera on Preece's car. And then a split second after that, it just went black. And there wasn't, as far as I saw, the NASCAR Drive camera on the 41 car wasn't working for the rest of it. And he was still on the track at that time. This was well before he actually went behind the wall of the garage area. And a lot of times, like we saw with Michael McDowell later in the race, they'll keep the camera on when the car goes into the garage area. So this was clearly a dangerous situation that was worsening and getting out of hand. And I'm disappointed that the broadcast didn't call it out for what it was, that they didn't recognize how dangerous and unnecessary and stupid this situation is, much like Preece mentioned. I know Preece did not specify in his interview with Bob Pockrass that it was the foam, but obviously the team was discussing it over the radio, so that's already been out there. But I agree with him 100%. That was a completely unnecessary situation. It was absurdly dangerous. It's well beyond the risks that these drivers already take on as being race car drivers themselves, because you're never going to get rid of the everyday risk of just what these drivers face already. But to describe this as just something, completely unnecessary that shouldn't have happened. And he's got to think, he's driving around there at full bore, still passing cars, didn't affect anything in the performance of the car. But he's got to think, wait, is this going to burn through the oil line? Are we going to have a situation like what Ryan Sieg had in the Xfinity Series race? And at that point, you got to park the car. And unfortunately, you can't address that in the garage area because of the crash clock. He's in there as a mechanical issue. But of course, if they stripped out the side of the car, took the foam out and traced down the issue, you're not going to be able to get back out there anyway. Because there's all the restrictions on trying to put any body panels back on the car. And then of course the car, if it's missing the foam, I don't know how many of these teams, even Stewart Haas's team, has that replacement piece, which again is a massive piece. I mean, look back to Ty Gibbs' incident at the Clash last year. You'll get an idea of just how large this piece of foam actually is and how much of the surface area it actually covers. Unbelievably dangerous situation, and it wasn't respected as such. And I think there was this attitude, and I don't know if it's just I don't like necessarily putting a panic into anything here and say like, oh, this could happen at any time, but it's like I'm glad that it's thankfully as rare as it is, that there's not as many situations. Seth Eggert did a great chart on this that I retweeted on social media there as well, that there have been a disproportionate number of Ford teams that have had these fires happen and so forth. But still, it's much like the tow truck situation. And the tow truck thing is a much more peripheral concern compared to this. There's no indication that there's something that's actually being done to actually address this. And in between, it's just kind of like, oh, not a big deal. I mean, if this happened on older broadcasts, I mean, they got to be, I've always questioned whether whatever the booth is, whether it's Adam Alexander's group or Mike Joy's group or anything. And, and Mike's seen it all. I know he recognized it to be as serious as it was. But I don't think anybody else did. And, putting it in the radio remix segment there and just playing, goofy music there and your graphics, stupid, just stupid. I hate that, I mean, it's so disrespectful to what these guys take on. And if something, God forbid something serious does happen, and one of these drivers can't get out of the car quick enough, and maybe he gets in a situation that Jordan Anderson faced or worse, I don't think they'll be able to know how to handle it at all. They'll probably have to just cut the feed. Because it's disappointing. It speaks to a lack of professionalism on that end too. I really wish that these broadcasts would call things out when something more serious happens. And I get it. There's a lot at stake. The sport wants to put the best foot forward here, and and you want to keep everything positive. And there's a lot of positives that are going on in the sport, and I think it's important to address those and not pretend that the sky is falling here. But when something wrong is happening, especially when there's a very clear trend of it, I really recoil at either just being dismissive of it or just being like, oh, that's obvious. And it's like, like when the wheels were being ground into pieces, where the wheel rims were coming apart. And there were a lot of discussions about that where it was like, oh, that's obvious. Of course that would happen. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why is that never brought up? I mean, I have to hear a Talladega broadcast where they mention where the start finish line is moved, 7 or 8 times in a broadcast, but something about a mechanical failure doesn't get discussed at all. Don't tell me that something is too obvious to not be, brought up a lot in a broadcast. There isn't, I mean, it's wanting your cake and eating it too on this has just been, unfortunately the approach. They want to both say that, oh, this is just for, people already know all this, but we also have a bunch of new, people that are into the sport because of the Netflix series or, new drivers coming into the circuit or whatever the reason is. But this is dangerous, and they're literally playing with fire here. And they need to be very public about this. Where's the transparency here? If they were, taking, looking at Eric Jones's car for how serious that accident was, or, hopefully they're doing something with Priest's car here, or Ryan Sieg's from yesterday's race to address, these situations. Obviously, two very different fires that were happening seem to be from two different causes, but just be transparent about it and tell us what's happening and and most importantly, what you're doing about it. Because the current approach right now, where it's just like, oh, well, this thing happened, and then we'll see a graphic maybe 6 months down the line on NBC and just treat it like, oh, this is just some everyday thing, and NASCAR handled it, and we used to have it like this, now we have it like this, and see, it prevents this from happening. Therefore, it's not happening at all. And then you go a few months down the line, and then it happens again. It's like, wait a minute, like, what's missing here? We really, really need to have that. And if we're not getting it as viewers, I certainly hope at least the teams are getting this, because they're the ones that are putting their lives on the line for this. And again, I know there's, I don't know how big, of a deal people are going to be talking about this story, but they really should be. It really should be. And I don't think it's a small thing, and I don't think it's an overreaction. I think it's something that's very much a concern. I mean, every safety advancement that has happened with these cars has been the result of something absolutely terrible happening in the sport. And one of the most infamous cases of fire was the loss of Glenn Fireball Roberts at Charlotte in 1964. A moment that I know for Ned Jarrett in particular still haunts him today as the person that came to his aid to try to rescue him from that car. Thankfully, the legacy of that accident is what we have with the fuel cells today, that we don't have rigid fuel tanks that can rupture and spread fuel everywhere and have a situation like that. Luckily, we've had a lot of technology that has advanced in that realm. And, we've seen it even today with the next-gen car and all these other advancements into how long you can run on fuel and what the ways are that you can run on, what reserve is left. So you're using like every drop of it. These are incredible advancements. But at the same time, the safety aspect, knowing that it's never going to be 100% safe, but this is one of those situations where, it should be too obvious for people to just dismiss out of hand. I think that's where it really needs to be looked at. And it's going to involve everybody. I think it's going to involve the media to hold NASCAR to account for it. It's going to involve NASCAR to respond to it appropriately. It's going to involve the teams to enact any changes that do get handed down the line. And it's going to involve the broadcast crew, the TV broadcast, to express to the viewer that this is not an everyday thing. It is not acceptable. It's not just, oh, this fun and weird thing that happened. It's serious. It's as serious as it can possibly get. We like to think that we're really far from victims like Gary Batson or Eddie Sachs if you're talking about the IndyCar world there, but we're not. These cars still run on gasoline, and it's still a danger when you work with that. It's just as dangerous for the drivers as it could be for the pit crew members that handle it, and they have to take on certain responsibilities as well to make sure their safety is encouraged. But that needs to be the same. We can't ever be that casual. I don't think it's really acceptable to be casual about fire in really any case. I mean, really, is this not, do we not make a big deal about any wildfire that happens in any part of the world or a structure fire or anything else? It's why is it acceptable here? That's not just a thing the car does. That's the part that makes it strange to me. They just treat this like, oh, that happens sometimes. It's like if I bought a rental car and the thing catches on fire, I'm taking the thing back. I'm like, this isn't. It's not supposed to do that. That's not a feature. That's a problem. So and you could probably say this is just as much the growing pains of the next gen car. But we're a couple years into this now. This shouldn't be happening at all. Rarely or not. If this happened with any other consumer product, you'd have a massive recall. But that's just where the sport is finding this. But yeah, complacency. Bulgogi, you're exactly right. That's the term. I think that this is really that's the situation. And I've seen the cost of complacency in this sport. It was like that, with the basal skull fractures and the Hans device and so forth. And it seemed like, oh, that's an overreaction. And, who's going to tell Dale Earnhardt to, wear the Hans device? It's like, well, somebody clearly should have. I mean, whether he would have or not, that would have been up to him. It's a delicate line, though. I mean, again, the sport is never, ever, ever going to be 100% safe. They could have these cars driving at 10 miles per hour, and it would still be dangerous. It's not. There's too many elements at play here that these drivers face, and they are, brave and daring individuals for facing it. And I don't think there's enough respect given for that. It too often becomes just a soap opera. And it's like, these are things that happen, and there's somehow a disjoint between what the driver experiences and what we're seeing on the track itself when they're in the cars. It's too easy to fall into that, and that could be really dangerous. It could be dangerous for everybody. And I think that as long as we get a sense that danger is being appreciated, I think that's very important. So I didn't want to go too far down that road on the show here, but I do want to address it pretty early on here, because it definitely bothered me through this weekend. And again, I'm glad that Ryan Sieg, for example, was able to get out of the Xfinity car yesterday and be able to laugh it off there a bit. But Ryan Preece in his interview, he was not laughing. There was definitely a situation there where, and again, if these drivers are just not able to talk about it, that's another problem that needs to be addressed too, because they should be. They're the ones that, are putting themselves in the middle of this here, and they should be allowed to say something out of this, whether it was, like what Harvick said when he faced this situation at Darlington. So hopefully it gets brought up. I'll definitely be, keeping an eye on this through the season, and especially when we get into these next couple of races covering between Kansas next week and Sears Point in June here. I mean, it's never going to be 100% safe sport, but clearly cars spontaneously catching on fire are not acceptable. It's not acceptable. It's not cute. It's not fun. It's not a weird thing that happens. It's dangerous. It's as dangerous as it could possibly get for these guys. And if it's not recognized as that, then I think a lot of other people need to look at what their perception of this sport is and really criticize that a little bit more. So we'll see. I'll be interested to see if that's going to be the trend this week or not. So Ryan Preece does end up being your last place finisher in this race, pending the results. A post-race inspection, he ends up the 37th place finisher. The first time the number 41 has finished last at Dover since 1993 with Phil Parsons, back when he drove for Larry Hedrick's team. Sadly, Larry Hedrick, no longer with us, passed away a couple years ago. But for many years, he campaigned the number 41 car, and I would still maintain had some of the most beautiful paint schemes out there. We saw Kyle Larson run a throwback to one of those paint schemes at Darlington when he ran so well in 2019. That being, of course, the famous Kodiak Chevrolet that Ricky Craven drove to Rookie of the Year in 1995. But before that, some of the other paint schemes, they brought Kellogg's cornflakes into the sport, or one of the first, rather. I think Tex Powell actually was the first with Chuck Bound, and then Larry Pearson drove it in 91. But I brought a diecast out from here to kind of give you an idea. That screenshot that I showed of the actual accident may not give you the best impression. But here's a Matchbox diecast I have of that Mannheim scheme. And let me bring that a little closer into the scheme. There we go. Kind of checking out here. Hopefully it doesn't get too blurry. Real nice. I mean, again, it's a little hard to tell. It's actually got a green nose on this versus the yellow body. But just a lot of fun with the neon colors here. It may seem a little bit too busy these days, but this would fit just as nicely with the any of their throwback schemes these days. Kind of actually has kind of a little bit of a almost Cole Trickle kind of inspired scheme. I'm always impressed with some of these old Matchbox cars that have actually bring up some of these other sponsors that show up on here too. I think this one here on the back, the state of North Carolina here on the deck lid. These Matchbox White Rose diecast will actually kind of feature in another one of the videos I'm working on at the moment. But this is one. Let me see what it says here on the back. The Statesville Auto Auction, Tar Heel Auction and Realty. So yeah, Mannheim, an auto auction company back then that sponsored the Hedrick team for years. They became an associate by the time Ricky Craven drove for them. But it was this scheme in 93 that Phil Parsons drove at Dover when he had a crash, I believe 12 laps into the race. He was a couple laps down and ended up being your last place finisher from that. So pending post-race inspection, that will be your last place finisher from this going on there. Yeah, it's 100% safe iRacing. Yeah, there you go. I'm with you there, Dave W. Exactly. And hey, we found, back in 2020, we found even iRacing isn't 100% safe. There were definitely casualties of that experiment now, weren't there? So that would be definitely another part of it. So safety is, I guess you could say it's an issue no matter what form of racing it is at the same time there. Let's see, kind of looking through other things from the race today. John Hunter Nemechek 2 laps down at the 20th spot. Let's see. Austin Cindric was decent in 15th there, kind of building on the run he had at Talladega last week. I'm just so impressed with Hemrick. I mean, that's a driver that always seems to be in the wrong place, wrong time, kind of has that Clint Boyer aspect to him there. But that was, again, a solid performance out of him there. Kind of reminiscent of when he made up all those laps at Fontana a couple of years ago, back when he was... I guess that was still with Kaulig back then. I'm trying to remember if that was, I guess that was Kaulig, yeah. Because whether it was that or, I don't think that was in the 8 car. He had the Poppy Bank paint scheme. He's run that paint scheme on so many different cars. It's hard to keep track of it sometimes. But that was definitely a big part of it there. But yeah, I'd say, I mean, it's unfortunate that there was so much controversy, especially at the beginning. And with that, because I think the rest of the battles up front in the second half of the race in particular, it was solid. It was solid for a Dover race. And I'm glad, and again, I don't want to make everything negative here on this, but I mean, sometimes you have to when it's something that's important. But I appreciate that at Dover, there was a great turnout for the race, beautiful weather. Hearing from a few people on social media, this is like the busiest they'd seen the area in like maybe 10, 15 years. I mean, that's huge. There are a lot of positives that are going on with the sport. And I think it's important to bring up any of these issues that are problems along the way, because you want those positive things to keep going. You want the sport to keep getting better there too. And I think that involves facing some real harsh truths about things that are happening, or just asking maybe some questions that you maybe don't have the answer to immediately there. So certainly the issue with the fires and also with towing the cars properly, these are things well within NASCAR's power to figure out. And it's their responsibility too, really, because this is their spec car to do. So they should be really taking on the responsibility to address that and figure that out going forward. Let's see here. So, again, solid Cup Series race. I definitely want to get into the Xfinity Series race here as well. Congratulations again to Ryan Truex for pulling off his second consecutive win at Dover. Seemed to start another Truex dominating weekend there, although Martin still had a fine job there in the third place finish in the race here too. Carson Kvapil, what can you say about this kid? In his second start, almost pulls off the victory there. Came very close to it. I'll tell you what, I was so surprised that the race actually went back green again. When they showed that radar at the end of that, towards the end of that race, and showing all that green coming up over the screen, and once it started raining a little bit, my brother and I, we just went out and grabbed lunch. So by the time we sat down and we're starting to eat, we actually heard that the race got started again. So just, but that was fine. I like that these days you can actually watch the races on your phone, which is fantastic. So we were able to kind of see what was happening at the end of it. And what a race it was. I mean, just crazy situations there. A lot of loose race cars, though. I mean, when you had the track surface not rubber in as well as it did during the race today, and you had a lot of cars breaking loose. Unfortunately, a lot of times Fox's camera would kind of move away right when somebody was kind of getting loose in a 3-wide battle. And I sensed a little bit of that frustration in the Cup Series race today too, even with the way the race played out being very different. I know there was one point where Mike Joy was trying to track the battle between Hemrick and Corey Heim, and yet they kept cutting back to Denny Hamlin for some reason, even though they were just running for 5th. And I could sense his frustration there because he wanted to kind of stay on that the last couple of laps. There was a lot of that in the Xfinity Series race too. And I think there's a lot of that was happening in that race that we probably just never get to see. A lot of guys that were just hanging on there at the end. Still at the same time, the way that was handled with the weather, unfortunate situation. I mean, you had a lot of people that were counting on the race ending under the red flag. And then you had other people that had to come back down pit road, cost Cole Custer a win of it, for sure. And then other competitors having to make the trip down pit road at the same time, made it a bit messy. The officiating, I do agree, was a bit sloppy there. But I do think with the drivers themselves and the show that they put on, I think they were really making another statement there of just, how strong the Xfinity Series field is, how racy the Xfinity cars are. It was definitely, it seemed like these drivers really had to manipulate these cars more creatively than the guys in the Cup Series could. The field didn't get nearly as strung out in those the Xfinity Series race there. But again, back to Carson Kvapil, seeing his father Travis so proud there on pit road. That was exciting to see. Shades of Dave Blaney, seeing Ryan Blaney win the championship last year. Almost had it. Leads 14 laps of the race, gets passed on the last green-white checker. And Ryan Truex pulls off the win. But his win will come, and it may well come this year, just in this part-time effort in that 88 car. And really, as much as JR Motorsports is pretty close to being one of the evil empires in the Xfinity Series for being one of the teams that's always up there at the front of the pack, they're still fighting the good fight with these other drivers they're bringing in, whether it's Carson or Bubba Pollard back at Richmond. And all these great runs that 88 car has had in that stretch there. It's top equipment. It's equipment that's very much capable of winning, but you still got to put somebody in there that's actually going to be capable of driving the dang thing. And between those two drivers there, very impressive picks. In the case of Bubba Pollard, very, long overdue for sure. Glad to see him get at least some shot at running in NASCAR's top 3 series. But Carson Kvapil, his stars on the rise. 20 years old, and already you're able to win at one of the series' most difficult tracks. Dover's not an easy track to win at. I mean, it's had first-time winners from Jody Ridley to, Martin Truex Jr. and other competitors there, but it's very rare. It used to be drivers like Bobby Allison would stomp the field and win by multiple laps. We're not necessarily in that era now, but guys like Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. are ones that you have to watch in the Cup Series side. But Carson was doing a fine job out there. Definitely deserves every bit of respect for that performance there. I'm sure he's disappointed not being able to pull off the win. I think the list of people who won in their second Xfinity start is pretty short. But fine job regardless, and I'm sure he'll be back very soon. Sheldon Creed as well, very close to pulling off his first win. Seems like he's still pounding on the door of being able to pull that off. Hopefully it'll happen in this next stretch here at the 18 car. I'm starting to be convinced that he's pretty much on the Daniel Hemrick plan, that he's just doing the best he can with whatever teams he was driving for. And then in that 18 car, he may well not win until Phoenix this November. And maybe he'll just find a way to get into the championship 4 and just make up for all of that in one sweet moment there at the finish. We got a lot of racing to do before we get to that point. But it's starting to kind of feel that way. I don't know if I'm the only one feeling that way, but that seems that way to me. So that would be definitely another one to look at. Let's see. Chandler Smith came back from some issues there as well. Kyle Weatherman, DGM Racing, Mario Gosselin's effort. We've talked about him a lot on the show here, especially with Josh Williams' efforts that ultimately got him that ride over at the colleague effort. They're just one of the strongest mid-pack teams. They're one of the few ones that seem really capable of breaking into the top 10, with some strong runs. Kyle Weatherman and Caden Honeycutt were the two drivers for them this weekend here, and both of them just did a tremendous job. We saw Josh Bilicki fight in the top 10 last week at Talladega with that bizarre finish that was happening out there. But here, Kyle Weatherman finishing 8th for the 4th time in his career, dating back to that landmark performance that he had for Mike Harmon at Kentucky back in 2020. So he has a fine showing. And then Honeycutt ended up back in the 23rd spot. But not too long before the end of the race there, he was battling in the top 10 as well. So a fine showing for both of them coming into the off week that they have before they return to action at Darlington. So if they're able to do that well at a track as difficult as Dover, hopefully they'll have another good night at Darlington here in a couple of weeks, or I guess a good afternoon for the Xfinity Series in that race. Another one that we have to talk about here, Anthony Alfredo, old Tony Sauce, is on quite the streak lately. 3 straight top 10 finishes here, not including a top 10 finish in his Cup race for Beard Motorsports last week. We're seeing much more of the Dude Wipes Chevrolet here in these recent weeks here, and I couldn't be happier for him, especially with him pulling off the bonus there, the Dash for Cash. And shame on Fox for not showing his interview at the end of that broadcast to show bowling, for Pete's sake. What is going on here? I'm glad that a day late and $1 short, they felt like finally showing his interview. But my goodness, what more does the man need to do? He is solidly in playoff contention. He may well pull off his first win here with that team, which has been a long time coming since that 0-2 was starting to get its feet under itself back in 2020, same year that Weatherman first broke through in the top 10. We'll see how things turn out for Anthony, but doing a tremendous job there in the number 5. So congratulations to him. That, as he said, I mean, that's a massive influx there for that bonus there to help that team out when they don't have a simulator and they don't have a lot of the toys that a lot of the big teams have, and they're still able to punch above their weight like that. That's a story that should be brought up a lot more in these broadcasts, and they should. I mean, Anthony Alfredo should be one of the most popular drivers, in that series right now. He'd probably be a lot more popular if he actually drafted Brennan Poole to try to win Talladega last week. But, it is what it is at that point. And he wasn't the only driver that was criticized for what moves he didn't make at the end of that race as well. But again, I want to make sure to definitely offer my congratulations as well to him on that. Also Parker Retzlaff with another great run. I'm almost not mentioning Retzlaff anymore because he's, he and the Jordan Anderson team, his teammate Jeb Burton, they seem to be in contention for top 10s pretty much every week now. And definitely showing the promise that we've seen ever since his first few starts at Phoenix there for RSS racing. So a fine showing for him. Another driver to mention here, Ryan Ellis. We saw Brennan Poole have some issues there, drop back at 22nd. Ryan Ellis finishing in the 13th spot, almost his season best on based off his 11th place run at Daytona. We saw him among the drivers trying to compete for that win at Talladega last week. Unfortunately, got dropped back in the pack. And as you notice, I'm wearing one of the uniform shirts from the team that they ran last week, the Four Locos sponsorship. And I want to give a particular shout out, and this is not a sponsored segment here, but I definitely want to make sure while wearing this here to give a shout out to Matrix Apparel for their incredible work with the Alpha Prime racing effort. I understand they're doing some more work with their throwback efforts here in a couple weeks at Darlington. They got some great stuff in the works there on that too. But this here, just an absolutely beautiful shirt. Let me show you a little bit better here on this. The graphics on this, the colors are just gorgeous. And when it said on the back here, it said you're either fourth or last. It's like, man, that I definitely had to find a way to snag one of these here. So big thanks to Matrix Apparel for sending this out. I told them I wanted to make definitely sure to wear it on the show here for Dover. And I'm glad that it coincided with a great run that Ellis had there in the Dover race as well. Ryan's a great kid. I've talked to him. It seems like every time at Phoenix, we always cross paths out there. And, he's gone through a lot in his career, just getting the best runs he can and scrapping these sponsors together. And he's running some great looking cars at the same time too. I loved the bright orange uniform he wore with his paint scheme too. That was another thing I really got a kick out of there with this. So that was definitely a big part of that too. But let's see here. Looking at other drivers further back in the pack, Austin Hill, Allgaier, Daniel Dye in the top 20. Leland Honeyman almost gets in the top 20, finishes in the 21st spot there too. Kyle Sieg in 27th, Dawson Cram back in 29th. Cram with a bit of controversy here too, although this was more the conventional type here, that being a bit of an altercation there at the beginning. Hate to see J.J. Yaley finish in last place, and especially for the Emmerling or the Joey Gase Motorsports effort there with the number 35 there at the same time. They've just had this entire stretch here, especially while the Our Motorsports team has been doing better with Alfredo. The Joey Gase team has just been on the completely wrong track. They had that wreck at Richmond that trashed one of their cars. They got last with brake issues with Akinori Ogata over at Martinsville, and they weren't able to get back out there and capitalize on a big pileup that would have climbed them out of the bottom 5. So they end up with the last place run there. Talladega, Joey's going for second spot, gets spun with inside of the finish line, drops all the way back to 18th. Now we go into this race here at Dover. Yaley doesn't have a sponsor. They didn't even have a driver. They brought Yaley in at midweek. They barely scrapped together some sponsorship for the hood of the car. Got back out there. He was gaining some spots in the early laps, not driving over his head. Yaley's an old pro. He knows what he's doing. And then unfortunately gets in this altercation coming off of turn 4, and he ends up with another car with the back end of it missing, and some more heavy work for it's going to be a busy off weekend for that Gase team, unfortunately. And it's not fair for any of them. I mean, sometimes that just happens. You know, you'll have a streak, and it could be really, really good, like we're seeing for Alfredo, or it could be really bad, like it's been for the Joey Gase team. And unfortunately, they're just finding themselves on that slide here. Hopefully, Darlington will be an opportunity for them to regroup. I don't know who's going to be driving the car. We'll find out. But then there was also a bit of controversy over what caused this accident. The replay that, or at least what we saw on the broadcast, seemed to show Haley Deegan and J.J. Yaley hitting the inside wall. Yaley's car sweeping up the track there. Then there were reports that Dawson Cram, the Satan driver that got in the back of Joey Gase going into turn 1 at Richmond a few weeks ago, was the driver that got into Deegan and Yaley, triggering this accident off the corner. Deegan apparently was dropping back through the pack. This was confirmed by a couple other teams, and this seemed to play a role in the particular accident that happened. And I know that Cram posted some telemetry after the race to show that, yeah, there was a bit of a stack up. He was part of it, but he was getting on the brakes and trying to back off from it, and they just got together, and it was just one of those situations. The reality of what actually happened is probably somewhere in between. I think probably, I think I think Yaley was probably more of the innocent bystander in that. He just happened to be right in the area of where Deegan was falling back, and Cram was trying to kind of back off from her at the same time, and just got caught up in it. Seemed like the 35 was kind of to the inside of the 15, and unfortunately it really ruined both their days. Cram had kind of a difficult run from there, finishing in the 29th spot, 3 laps down. But Yaley ended up out of the race with a tore-up car, and Haley Deegan was just kind of limping along there, finishing 8 laps down. She ends up in the 31st spot there, too. Again, could have just been a racing deal there. But I think for the Gase team, I mean, it's as much as I think there was some positives that were gleaned from what happened at Richmond, and whether it was selling T-shirts or doing fundraisers or things of that nature to help out that program there. I think that if there's a second incident where Cram's at least at all involved in it, I mean, maybe not, certainly not intentional. I mean, I'm not going to ascribe that, but when there's a common denominator here, I think that that's going to be potentially an issue that the team's just not going to be happy about there. And, the bottom line is the Gase team is just tearing through a lot of equipment here. And while they're doing an auction, and the last I saw, it was like $3,000 for auctioning off the rear bumper of Gase's car at Richmond. So hopefully that's going to be something that's going to go towards, I don't know if it's going to charity or if it's going to help that program out. I think they could certainly use that, especially after the fine that they got from NASCAR. So something that maybe kind of, help fabricate some of these cars back together again for the next stretch run here. It's just difficult, and it's an unfortunate situation there too. But regardless, it ends up with Yaley being your last place finisher of the Xfinity Series race yesterday. Ryan Sieg next to last, and it's interesting again. The reason out, at least for a last place finisher, the reason fire has not come up since 1977 with Bobby Waywick in the Daytona 500. I don't know if it's come up in other finishing positions outside of last place, because I don't really keep statistics on that. But in this case here, Ryan Siegs is listed as an engine problem, and Blaine Perkins, next third from last, is shown as an electrical problem, even though it was very clearly some form of a fire that was causing both of those situations. But they end up in the bottom 5. Corey Heim in the 35th spot. Taylor Gray in 34th, rounding out the bottom 5 there after he got bounced off the outside wall in the closing stages there. But again, solid Xfinity Series race. Again, a bit of a messy situation there with the with what was going on there with the officiating. But regardless, pretty competitive race there at the same time. Let's see here. So, want to kind of, let's see here. I'm kind of checking some of the other comments here at the same time on arrow blocking. Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's still at least had a pretty close battle there at the end. It's just, yeah, you'd like to see a situation where if somebody's able to catch the leader, that they actually have a chance to actually kind of get around them. But it's just that difficult of a situation. I guess that's just where we are right now with these cars. I'm not going to pretend to know what the solution is, but maybe somebody will figure that out. I do want to say on a cosmetic sense here that I kind of like this version of Denny Hamlin's paint scheme. I don't know how you guys feel. I think the number 11 actually looks pretty good with that sign. As much as I've never been a big fan of moving the numbers off the doors, I think that the way they set it with kind of that crooked logo there, it actually looks kind of more purposeful. And I always like cars with nice white accents on them, as I think they look pretty interesting. Not just like a car with like white text on it, but like if it has like some real creative use of it, somehow that always looks good to me. I don't know if that's like my favorite color on a race car, because I still am much more of a fan of like bright orange and then like a powder blue. So of course, pretty much anything like a Petty related paint scheme, like we saw today with the 43, that's right up my alley. Heck, it even has the white accents on it too. But that would be another one to kind of look at. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid paint scheme. Speaking of which, I guess we could talk about this too. Kind of looking at my notes here. We got Throwback weekend coming up here in a couple weeks. We covered the action in Kansas next week. We leave for that this Thursday. We'll be on the road Thursday and Friday, and then covering the action on Saturday and Sunday before heading back here to NASCAR headquarters. I don't know if we'll do a show that Sunday on the road, or if we'll do it when I get back on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll stay tuned on that. We'll give you some more information on that. We'll talk about that at that point. But the Throwback weekend will be the week after that. For the spring race at Darlington, and we'll do the show for that week after that race there. And we're already seeing some of the Throwback paint schemes. Two that I'm particularly excited about: the Kyle Larson Kellogg's paint scheme, the Terry Labonte car, long overdue. And one of the few schemes I think still kind of works with the numbers moved forward, because they just made the Kellogg's replica logo a lot bigger, even on the old scheme. And I think it did peak with the Lumina. I think it was designed for that, with those nice straight lines, and it just looks great. I mean, it stayed in the sport from 1994 through 99, and for good reason. One of the most iconic cars out there. I had a keychain back in the 7th grade that was like that had that paint scheme on it for many years. So that one always stands out. So love it. I love the uniforms they took with it. I think they did a nice job integrating the Hendrick Cars logos with it. And I think it's going to look fantastic out there. And I like that they had Terry Labonte, of course, involved in the promotion of it. Also a great tie-in, of course, to the 40th anniversary of Hendrick Motorsports. So undoubtedly there's going to be a lot of pressure there to win. I know Terry Labonte was saying, yeah, put that thing in victory lane for me. And as well he would, for sure. So that'll be a big moment for him too. So we'll find out if that's going to be the case. Larson certainly no slouch over at Darlington, but there's going to be many other drivers competing for him. Another one as well, the Truck Series race. Really like the Russ Wheeler paint scheme. I'm going to be very interested to see, because we did see this paint scheme used before. We saw it with BJ McLeod and Rick Ware Racing a couple of years ago, but now we're seeing it actually with the number 18 on it, which is great. And this is a scheme I was always surprised that Kyle Busch never ran with his team. I mean, now he's sold KBM, so that window's closed now. But I never understood why he always ran the Rowdy Burns paint scheme, and he never ran the Russ Wheeler paint scheme. And I still think, and I've gone back and forth on this, there's been times where I think the Superflow car is the best, and times I think the City Chevrolet car is the best. I've always found like the Exxon car to be my least favorite of all those. But even it has, those shots of it in Days of Thunder when he does like the test laps in it, those are gorgeous shots. So it's good, but it's still in last place in my list. But the top of my list still right now is that Russ Wheeler car. And it's so interesting. When we see some of these like show cars or movie cars that have turned up in the woods, and they have like little bits of the paint that's been saved like under like the rear spoiler, and you see it's this beautiful color. And I'm afraid I'm colorblind, so it's a little bit tricky for me to describe it. But that's what I like with neon colors. They're usually so bright and bold that even I could kind of tell what they look like. It's just like this electric honey color. It's this very, very bright orange. It's not quite yellow. I always viewed that paint scheme, the Hardy's number 18 car, as being yellow and blue. But with this one, it's this very faint orange. It's got a little bit more red in it there. and it's just beautiful. I can't describe it. It's just it's a very interesting color, and it makes you look at the paint scheme in a different way, kind of a little bit of a darker shade to it there, but not dark because it's still got that neon brightness to it. Just gorgeous. And I'll be curious to see how closely they can replicate that. I mean, obviously nowadays they do wraps instead of paint, so that's tricky, and even when they painted the Russ Wheeler cars back then, they almost immediately faded yellow in the films. That's why, I mean, it turned out that way that you usually see it. So they usually didn't have that color. I think Stapleton 42 did a video on that revealed that story a bit more. So check out his channel there for more on that. But yeah, I think that to me, that just put it over the top. Like, that made it one of my favorite paint schemes there. So, and I love that I asked, I put it out there to see, like, I hope Tyler Ankrum actually wears the glasses, because he's got kind of the Russ Wheeler, Carrie Ells hairstyle, the pompadour hairstyle there. You always see like him using Johnny Bravo as his pit signboard there on pit road. And I was like, wow, is he going to wear the glasses, like the round glasses with like the bluish gray lenses? And then he showed him, he had them on top of the truck there. And I was like, okay, now this is going to be fantastic. So I'm very much excited about that Truck Series race. And I know it's going to be at night, but I hope he still wears the sunglasses there, at least on pit road, because that'll be exciting. I think that's going to be one of the showstoppers out there in the Truck Series field. And I hope we get a lot more reveals. It feels like we've had a very lean number of throwback schemes this year. And I know that some people have mixed feelings about this, where they say, oh, well, throwback weekends played out and all that. No, I don't think so. There's so much of NASCAR history and so few paint schemes that have been really replicated in it. And for one thing, first of all, I have no problem with some paint schemes to get run over and over again, even if the theme of Throwback Weekend has changed. Like, maybe they focus on a different decade. I think if there's any aspect of Throwback Weekend that probably doesn't need to be maintained, it's picking a different era, because these sponsors and drivers, they're going to pick whatever paint scheme they want to run. You could say it's the 1950s, and you'll still have a number of people picking Days of Thunder paint schemes. But that's fine. I don't care if they run the City Chevrolet car every week. I mean, I think that would be great. It looked gorgeous with Kurt Busch driving it. It looked gorgeous with William Byron driving it. We were at Darlington that year in 2019. Looked fantastic in person. And it's going to be great with Ryan Ellis driving it here in a couple weeks. And I know Matrix Apparel has already worked on replicating those shirts too, and those are going to be gorgeous. So it's going to be, they're all in with that. I've got no problem with them running that every Throwback Weekend. I don't get how people can be sick of that, because I always figured from, if you're an older fan like myself, you definitely have something that kind of reminds you of something from that back in that era. And I figured if you're not of that era and you're a younger fan, maybe you're learning more about these things for that time. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's something that everybody can take something from. I grew up in the 90s, back in a time where the only thing that was cooler than knowing something was learning something. And, we need to kind of get back to that again. I don't believe in ridiculing somebody if they don't know something. I think if they're interested in something and they see this paint scheme, they don't know what it's from, and it's okay, this is cool. Now we can talk about where this came from, and and maybe learn something from that. So I think that should still be there. I think if there's, I'll be very curious what happens with Throwback Weekend, in the future, and if it still stays at Darlington. I think it fits at Darlington very well. But I think the only place it would probably fit better would be North Wilkesboro. And I think the only thing that would be better than that at North Wilkesboro would be an actual points paying race there, and not just the All-Star race. I think if you had a points paying race at Wilkesboro, if they did throwback schemes there, like we saw with Eric Jones last year, when they ran that version of the 43 car, the one they ran today was actually, I think, a lot better than last year, because again, it didn't have those black accents on the roof. It had more of the blue on it there. So it was just gorgeous. I think that would be the only way to really improve that. But I'd hate for Darlington to lose it, and I like that they still have it as the reason for the second dates. You got the Southern 500 is a standalone event. It's a big enough event with its history, and now being in the playoffs and everything and so forth, or on the other side of the playoffs, I guess, is the cutoff this year. But the spring race, I like that it has that throwback aspect to it. And yeah, it makes it something special for the spring. And also springtime, generally, you're going to have nicer weather. It's going to show the paint schemes off very nicely. And that's a good way to, a race that's like, noontime there, kind of has that old school feel to it too. I think that's a well measured thing. I still don't think it should be on Mother's Day weekend, but I've talked enough about that on this show too. So we'll kind of have that going. But yeah, I don't get where, people have any problem with Throwback Weekend. I think it's fantastic. I think it's great. I think it, and for a lot of the veterans that are still involved in the sport, not just the drivers, but, say pit crew members or crew chiefs. We've seen tributes to crew chiefs and their past rides they've run. It's a large family of people in this sport, and you could honor any number of them, not just them, but maybe their family or their friends. Yeah, I think that's always really exciting. So I love Darlington. It's one of the best tracks I've visited there, and participating in Throwback Weekend, wearing my Jerry Nadeau jersey there. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do that. I didn't do it the first year because I was like, well, is this going to be appropriate? I hope this isn't breaking some unspoken media rule. But then I got in there and everybody's wearing Throwback stuff. And I'm like, dang it. I missed the opportunity. But then I was like, okay, we got to go back. We got to go back. And we did a couple years later and did that proper. So that was fun. That was cool. So, yeah, it's a fun thing. It's the closest NASCAR gets to a cosplay convention. You can actually have people out there and actually, dressing like their favorite merch and stuff like that. Or, people dressing in old uniforms and everything. So that's always exciting. So yeah, it should stay. And, if I think it's got a nice spot where it is, if it doesn't change, but if they are going to change it, I think Wilkesboro would do just as fine a job as Darlington would. But if they do that, I hope Darlington gets something, good in exchange. But I'm not in a rush to really change that. I'm much more interested in Wilkesboro getting a 400 lap points paying race than them getting a Throwback Weekend on top of it. I think, really a 400 lap race there would be special enough for how prestigious that race is and how difficult it can be to run a race that long there. I want to really see some tire drop off and make some good use of that new pavement out there. I think that'll be another one to look at. Let's see, kind of talking about this, checking on those. I don't know if I mentioned on the show a couple weeks ago, I want to congratulate Colby Evans on running 7th in the Salem Supercar Series a couple weeks ago there. Another person that's very active on social media here, especially talking about the small teams. Definitely want to congratulate him on getting his first laps out there, and I'm sure getting on towards getting your own racing reference.info page. I know that's got to be real exciting. So I want to give a shout out to him too. Another thing that kind of came up this past week that I want to talk about is the new chicane at Watkins Glen. We got Watkins Glen coming up this fall, which is already going to be different because it's going to be when the leaves change instead of its traditional August date, and being in the playoffs and so forth. I know there's mixed feelings about that in the region from some friends of mine that I've spoke to out there. But the other thing that came up here was the other changes made to the chicane itself, including specifically a lot more like bumps, some very aggressive, I guess you could say turtles in those spots there to kind of dissuade drivers from shortcutting the loop. And, some very aggressive moves we've seen in the past where people can kind of slalom through it really quickly, and it doesn't seem to really scrub off that much speed going into the carousel there. Again, I don't feel as much that the sky is falling on that one there with the changes to it. For me as a viewer, I think it's just going to be interesting to see like maybe, how these drivers handle that, knowing how long that back straightaway is into the chicane and how difficult it is to actually navigate through that. I mean, yeah, are they going to have to go a lot slower? Is this going to be more of a braking zone? What's the effect going to be for the NASCAR through there? As fun as I think it is to kind of throw a car through there and kind of do that quick right, left, right, left, right, back out of there again. This is interesting. I'm more intrigued by it than upset by it. And I know a lot of the drivers, the ones that are really outspoken about it, because they're thinking, oh my goodness, maybe for the Cup Series, it's like, yeah, it's going to tear out the underneath of the car and we're going to have a problem with that, or, whatever the case may be. But, again, I'm be interested to see how it actually plays out. I'm willing to kind of see how it goes. I think the one response that I can't sign off on is people saying, oh, why don't we just skip it altogether? And it's like, no, you're never going to have me sign off on that, I'm afraid. We all know why we don't fly through that back straightaway without the chicane. I know the track said initially that was there for a viewing area, and they did used to have, grandstands there before they had mobile homes parked there. But no, I can't sign off on the, and not that I would have any say in it anyway, but I'm not going to be one of the people that's going to put out a video saying like, okay, we need to get rid of the chicane and just go flying into turn 5 there. And especially if we're talking about safety issues with these cars already, do we really want to do that? Do we want to go down that road again and just make it more dangerous? No, I'm not going to sign off on that at all. So I think one thing that was interesting though was in the discussion revealing the talk about the old chicane that's there, which is a much more, it's also impractical for its own reasons, because you basically have to get all the way down the straightaway and then just short of it, like basically where the chicane ends now, you have to make a hard right-hand turn, like 90 degrees into this. And then it like goes at an angle and then straightens out halfway through the carousel. And then you're kind of picking your way through that, going way, way slower. That was actually a chicane that was used at the track. Kind of basically takes a notch out of the first like quarter of the I guess the diameter, the circumference, or just whatever it is of the actual corner there at the end of the straightaway. And that was for amateur drivers back in the day because they couldn't be trusted to go barreling in there that fast. And only the professionals could kind of sling it in there. I don't see that coming back. I mean, nowadays, it was the pavement there was very rough. I was originally told that they tore it up, but actually it's still there. You can see the picture I put on social media from 2018. If you park your campers kind of in that same area at turn 5, you can see that road goes right down the road there, and emergency equipment can still use it. I don't know if they usually stage there, but it's definitely an option for them because it just opens straight up onto the track there that way. But that would be another one to look at. But yeah. Isn't that where the boot is? Oh, it's a good question. The boot's actually on the other side of the carousel. So yeah, the chicane, is it where the boot is? Are we talking about? I thought they changed the chicane on the end of the back straightaway. Am I getting that wrong? Because I thought they were talking about them actually changing, they're making it rougher in the backstretch chicane. Definitely mention in the chat if I got that backwards. But I thought that's when everybody was talking about it, it seemed like more NASCAR people were responding to it. Now it's definitely possible social media can get something wrong. So yeah, if that was the case. But yeah, the boots, that's on the other side of the carousel. So you'd actually have to go 2/3 of the way through that the carousel and then just keep going straight instead of completing the corner. And that's where you get the boot. So that's a different deal there from the chicane on the back straightaway where it's going into turn 5 and slowing you down for that corner. So that's kind of the big part of it. But yeah, I think that would be a different place to look at. Ooh, a Dave Marcus throwback on Zane Smith's car. I'd like to think Spencer Sandlin, that's a great idea. I'd like to think that maybe that's on the table because I thought it was kind of interesting they brought the 71 back. Yeah, we could potentially see, wouldn't it be great? We could potentially see a couple of those because you got Raja Caruth in the 71 also. And he's just running the Hendrick Cars paint scheme. And then you got the Zane Smith's one. I think either one of them would make good. Maybe you have a big up, maybe do Big Apple markets for Raja Caruth and maybe the Real Tree paint scheme for the Zane Smith one. Although Real Tree just won with Kyle Busch recently, so maybe they would put that for Raja's truck and put like the actual Dave Marcus 71. That would be pretty sick. I can see them actually doing that. Maybe Big Apple markets maybe would be more for that, or Lifebuoy soap. There's so many iconic Dave Marcus schemes going all the way back to the K&K insurance schemes that he ran back then. That would be exciting. I'd like to think that's the case. Again, another great Stapleton 42 video there with the tours of the shops recently. It's good to see more people talking about Dave Marcus lately. So hopefully that's going to be a trend that keeps continuing too. But yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, we'll do some trivia here in just a minute. I'll do some show and tell here as well to kind of lead into it. Before I transition into that, I guess I can go ahead and jump into some other things I'm working on. So again, as I mentioned, we'll do the coverage of Kansas this weekend. So stay tuned on social media there. I got the magnet. I should have brought it up here. I have it downstairs, but I'll reveal that closer to the date there. Got the magnet all set up to go there for Kansas. We got the names of the current Patreon members Patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock for that. We had a couple new members last couple weeks, so already got a couple names to add on there, which is exciting. And then after we return from that trip, that magnet will be not auctioned off, but it's going to be it would do a drawing for whoever wins that among the active members in the Patreon there. So if you're interested in that, and if you join between now and early next week, you'll be able to have your name added on there and also entered into the drawing for that as well. So very excited about that. Never been to the Kansas Speedway before. This will be our first Midwest race that we've covered, and this will be the 13th, I believe, 12th or 13th different track, I believe, that I've attended for a NASCAR race before. So that'll be another one to take off the list there at the same time. So we'll be doing more of the last place coverage. I'm going to co-write the ARCA article for the Tide 150 on Saturday. And we'll get that together and make it coordinating with our staff writers on that. Since they follow that series a bit more closely, I'll do the trackside stuff there for sure. And then we'll merge that in with the biography and so forth from there. And then, of course, I'll do my regular last place coverage for both the Truck Series on Saturday night and the Cup Series, the Advent Health 400 on Sunday. So very exciting. I hope you guys are excited. It'll be a great coverage there. I don't know if I'll do a stream there again on the road, but stay tuned to my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock, and we'll give you some more updates on that through the weekend here and figure things out from there. So that'll be another one to look at too. What are your thoughts on the All-Star tire experiments, Ryan Idias? Good question. I don't have too many thoughts on that. I know we saw last year when they were running the rain tires, we saw a much more competitive race than when the track actually dried out and they ran the tires that were actually intended for the race. I don't know if we're going to see that big of a difference if they're going to be both designed for just dry weather there. So I'm not sure. I think that if they're going to go that direction, they probably need to they're going to have to really track the intervals very closely to kind of see the difference. I don't see that being as big of a difference at a short track versus if the race was still in Charlotte or a much larger track out there. I think that's going to be much trickier there. So I don't know. It could be fun. It's always something that NASCAR has used to kind of experiment with new things, whether it's been stage racing or moving the numbers or putting those silly chassis lights under the rear of the car. It's worth trying. It's worth trying. I just don't think we're going to get a massive difference here. I think what they're looking for is they want to have, comers and goers and so forth. I don't think they've changed the format enough to really allow for that with what they're doing for the All-Star race this year. I hope it's still a good race. And I think the fact that it's North Wilkesboro still makes it special as is, which is why, again, I think that I will continue to beat the drum that it needs to be a points-paying race at 400 laps and not just 100 or 200 laps, for an all-star race. It's a well-meaning venture. And obviously, thank goodness they brought this track back from, the brink of extinction here, because, that was well worth it too. But boy, oh boy, I want a points-paying race. I would love to cover a points-paying race there for sure. I think that would be a tremendous event to see. And, something that would really be more befitting the legacy of that track, because I don't think we only get a taste of what North Wilkesboro is like with this all-star race. I think the way you really understand it is when you get a long green flag run there, and you could have a race there where somebody leads, 250 laps at this track and just dominates it and tries to navigate their way through traffic, and it becomes a race of survival. And, I hope that doesn't sound boring to people, because I think that would be captivating. I think it would be really exciting. And, see if, how tire strategy works out, not so much in terms of compounds like they're trying for the All-Star race this year, but just tire wear, I think would just be fascinating. We'll see if that's going to be the situation or not. But that's something I'm holding out for. I hope that in the next year or so, that'll be, I think, pretty exciting. Let's see. Copper Cookie, seeing your question about what happened to NY Racing. Not sure. That seems just, they seem to just kind of reappear and disappear all the time here in the sport. We saw them pop up earlier this year and almost make the Daytona 500 with JJ Yaley. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm afraid I don't have more information on that. I haven't really been in touch with the team since then there, but every once in a while they just pop back up again, and it could just as easily be this week as it could be 6 months from now. So I think that's kind of the story there. Do I think Portland will get a cup date, Andrew Bremner? Possibly. I mean, they put on a great show with the Xfinity Series. I think it's an interesting venue, just being right off the freeway there. I'm sure the region would enjoy having a cup race up there. Yeah, I'd be open to it. I think it would be interesting. But again, that area in the Northwest, I think, is underrepresented in the sport. And despite the fact that, you've had drivers like Derek Cope and Casey Kane come from the region, and other competitors there as well. I think of Herschel McGriff being from Oregon. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to have that area's needs addressed, because it's a long trip to go back all the way south, even to our home track here in Sonoma, or Sears Point rather. But that would be another one to look at. Let's see. Remember Jeff Bodine lapped the field? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 1994. So that'd be another one. Joe Graff Jr. and Sage Karam will be at Somerset Patriots Thursday night. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that's right. The Xfinity off weekend. It's too bad they don't have Xfinity at Kansas this weekend. I guess that's just for the fall race there. But it'll be great to do ARCA, though, because we haven't done an ARCA National Series race before. We've seen ARCA West before coming out here to Sears Point, but haven't done the ARCA National Series. So I've never seen like Brad Smith's team in person, or Wayne Peterson's and all that. And I'm very excited to see that because I think they got a very interesting culture over there. And I'm glad they're still active in the sport. I know we just passed the anniversary of when we lost James Hilton and Tweet, and that was just an awful weekend there. But I'm glad the 48 car is still out there. Apparently they had an issue with their truck, so they couldn't compete at Dover this weekend. Hopefully they get that addressed before Kansas, because I'd love to be able to see them in person there. We haven't done that yet, but for those of you who are unfamiliar with Brad Smith over in that team there, you saw him, a little bit of him in my video on Buddy Arrington, because he actually drove one of Arrington's old Chryslers in the ARCA series back in the day there. So that was always interesting. That too. I'll actually mention this at the same time. Speaking of my videos, I've been getting a ton of work done this week in particular on After Allen, my 3-part series on the story of what happened after Alan Kowicki clinched the 1992 Winston Cup Championship, carrying over into 1993. The tragedy of Blountville, and what happened during the rest of the season there with Jeff Bodine taking over the team. That's been coming together very well. I don't think it'll be ready before Kansas. And if it is, that week will be the advanced access for those of you that are the Patreon that are at the $5 and up levels. But I think a May release is very realistic at this point. It's coming together very nicely. I hope that it'll be set up pretty well. I want to fine tune a couple things with the audio and the pacing and so forth there, but I think we're going to be in pretty good shape there for that. So if you're interested in advanced access to that, that's the $5 and up level, patreon.com/LastCar on Brock. And there's more details on that. You get some perks as well. Send out some stickers this week here, and trading cards and whatnot. My business cards, of course, that I produced there for the website. And things of that nature. I like sending some fun stuff in the mail there. So if you're interested in that, you have that option as well with the Patreon. So very excited to get that together. From there, I'll be working on some more scripts and kind of just trying to get some more content out there. I think since this is going to be a 3-part series, this will be a great opportunity to kind of build on that and go from there. So that's another thing that's coming up here very much in the short order here too. So let's see here. There it is. Kind of checking this out. Alrighty. Somebody making a comparison and seeing Denny Delivers tweet here comparing the finish of Vegas to the Dover finish. And you got Kyle Larson taking the air off Tyler Reddick there in the Vegas race. Very similar. Yeah. I mean, I could see where people are complaining about the use of air to kind of disrupting the air to kind of prevent somebody else from getting a run on you there, because that could be frustrating for sure. That'll definitely be another part of it. Let's see. So we'll do some trivia questions here to kind of wrap up the show for this evening. And I do have show and tell for that too, so we'll jump into that. We'll bring out our late 90s deal here. Got this up on the screen. Hopefully we're not, I hope we haven't been out of focus since I did the diecast thing earlier, but I guess that'll be another part of it. Okay. We'll just do some questions and answers here. Go ahead and let me know in the chat which category you'd like, and then we'll do the show and tell segment here in the meantime. Categories, again, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and mention in the chat which one you'd like, and we'll go ahead and do that. Again, the categories are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So while you guys pick that out, I'm going to set that over there. So in the interest of one of the drivers of the hour from this weekend, I was going to save this originally for Throwback weekend, but I think it's more fitting for this week. I was kind of bringing things out. Talk about throwback schemes to kind of kick things off, and also to talk about Anthony Alfredo and congratulating him for the fine run and the disappointment of Fox not giving him his due there and showing his interview after the race. Thankfully, posting it on social media earlier today to catch that as well. Anthony Alfredo ran one of my favorite throwback schemes of the last couple of years, and I want to show it here in diecast form. I've worn the shirt on the show here before, but I've had this here as well, and I wanted to kind of bring this out here. Okay, there we go. Let's make sure I get this out. There it is. And actually ties in with the Alan Kowicki video as well. This is one of my favorite throwback schemes I've seen. And again, the use of the color white, or at least making it really stand out. This one was fantastic. 2021 ran the old school Hardee's paint scheme, like back in the Bill Terry era that Kowicki drove. This one here, signed by Alfredo here. Just a beautiful scheme. I love how this came out. Of course, the number of the traditional spot there. I love the font that they use to kind of replicate the Hardee's font on that. I thought this was a really great paint scheme out there. Yeah, it just happened to be Alfredo running it. I love that it's got the rookie stripes from his rookie season there in the Cup Series too. The hashtag Brave like Wyatt there logo on the back. The different pinstriping on the tires there. So definitely wanted to show that on here. I thought that was a great paint scheme. I don't think it got a lot of attention. I believe he finished in like the mid-20s there in that race. It was not the last place finisher. I think that was the one where Eric Almirola had the Winn-Dixie car and he got the wreck at the beginning of it there. But I thought this one was great. And they basically they finally marked it down over on Circle B a while back there. And I was like, okay, well now that it's cooled down a bit, I'm gonna have to pull the trigger on it there. So I thought that was a great paint scheme there. And so kudos again to Anthony Alfredo. And actually, as a bonus here on this too, as it happened, they also set this 64 scale diecast of this card. Now, I already had one of these here, so I'm going to give away this diecast for one of the trivia questions tonight. And I think this, I was going to save this for Throwback weekend, but again, with Alfredo having this great streak going into the off weekend for the Xfinity Series, I think this would be fun. So we will have, I'll let you know which question it's going to be, but if you haven't had this one in your collection yet, this will go to somebody here a little bit later in this section. So stay tuned for that. I am seeing some mentions of this here with, with Tech Inspection. Let's take a look. We can pull that back up. Alrighty. Cup Tech Complete. Yep, there it is. 2 minutes ago, we do have a call here. Cup Tech Complete, no issues. Denny Hamlin is the winner. Truex and Elliott's cars to R&D. I'll be interested to see if there's any issue with Truex. One story I think that was going to be kind of interesting is when they damaged the nose of the car, when he ran the back of who was he? He ran the back of Bowman, was it? And that one restart. I wondered if like the tape they were going to be doing, because they're going to have to use tape. That's just what they got to do these days. If any of that was going to get in the way of that grill down there, and maybe there's going to be some kind of infraction with that. I wonder if that's what NASCAR is going to look at with the 19 car there. I couldn't get a good sense of what repairs they did make, because that whole part of that nose of that car is just black on black, so you can't really see what's happening. And I didn't get a good look at that like towards the end of the broadcast there. So we'll see if that's going to be the situation or not. But again, congratulations to Denny Hamlin on the win. That means Ryan Preece is going to be the last place finisher, his first since the 2022 Coca-Cola 600, and of the first number 41 since, again, old Phil Parsons running the Mannheim Auto Auctions car in 1993. So there we go. Hey, Alexandra, thank you for checking in on the show here as well. Again, we're going to do some trivia questions here, and one of the questions will be a bonus round here for this Anthony Alfredo 64 scale of the 2021 Alan Kulwicki throwback here. So we'll have that in just a little bit here too. So I'll let you know before that question which question that is. The other ones will just be for fun here, and we'll go ahead and warm up with that. So which category are we going to do? Somebody keeping count. Let's see, a lot for teams. Looks like it might be teams today. There we go. Let's see. Drivers, tracks. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5 for teams. That would be another one too. Alrighty. Okay, so let's do some teams questions here. Again, we'll just start off with a couple here for fun, and then I'll let you know well in advance here which one will be for the Alfredo car here. So we'll have that in a little bit. Alrighty. So first question here under the teams category. This is a good one. Who was tapped to be the crew chief for the Elliott Marino team in 1998? Now, as much as I know about that team, that doesn't come to mind immediately. I think I know who it was, but I might be thinking of the one of the Melling team instead. Let me read that again. Who was tapped to be crew chief for the Elliott Marino team in 1998? Don't look it up. Try to guess it here. Who was tapped to be crew chief for the Elliott Marino team in 1998? So it sounds like who initially got the deal there. Boop. All right, we're still here. Okay. Guesses for Jerry Pitts, Richard Petty, George Elliott, Joe Fenig, Dan Marino, Larry McReynolds. Several guesses. This is actually a good one. I probably should have made this the diecast question, but this is a good tricky one. Who was tapped to be the crew chief for the Elliott Marino team in 1998? Alrighty, here we go. Last time, Chad Knaus, Luke Evangelista, Doug Richard. Good guesses, good guesses. Who was tapped to be crew chief for the Elliott Marino team in 1998? The answer is Jerry Pitts. Jerry Pitts is the correct answer. Glenn 7000, you were the first one of that. Good on you. Jerry Pitts is the correct answer. Okay, make sure it wasn't out of focus. Okay, good. All right, this one just for fun here too. Next question. Who drove 60 races for Holman Moody before becoming crew chief, then shop foreman? Who drove 60 races for Holman Moody before becoming crew chief, then shop foreman? Is he a goalie? There we go. Yeah, Jerry Pitts. That's the one you guys got earlier. Excellent. Who drove 60 races for Holman Moody before becoming crew chief, then shop foreman is the next question. All right, we got guesses for Tiny Lund. We got ones for Al Unser. Let's see here. Dick Hutcherson, Cotton Owens, Beauchamp. Okay, we got good guesses. Lightning McQueen. Okay, here we go. Let me read it again. Who drove 60 races for Holman Moody before becoming crew chief and then shop foreman? That is the question. Yeah, the tweet from earlier. Yeah, IndyCar had the mannequin drop on the track, and the NASCAR's like, look at this big rubber duck. I got a so what thing on that one. It's like, come on, nobody else thought that was funny. Like, I get that Bob Pockrass recorded that segment earlier about the rubber duck at the track, but the timing of it was just so perfect. It's like, oh, IndyCar is getting a lot of attention because this dangling mannequin fell on the track, and somebody ran over its hand, and now it's like, oh wait, look at this over here. We can be crazy too. That the timing was undeniably funny. Who drove 60 races for Holman Moody before becoming crew chief and then shop foreman? The answer is Dick Hutcherson. Dick Hutcherson is the correct answer. I think a few of you got that. Glenn 7000 again on the button here. Looks like you were the first one there. Did anybody else get that? I don't think so. Does the rubber duck have lights? Exactly. Yeah, the whole IndyCar thing, the stuff with Penske, I don't have too much to add on that. I haven't followed IndyCar that closely. All I can say is it's just a mess, and it's unfortunate. And I guess they're probably pretty happy that mannequin came loose on that bridge, because now, now it's everybody's going to be memeing that too much to pay any attention to anything else that's happening. So maybe that's the best thing that ever happened to the series going into the month of May. All right, next one. This one just for fun, too. We'll get to the diecast questions shortly here. What driver accounted for 36 of owner Nord Krauskopf's 43 career wins? Let me read this again. What driver accounted for 36 of owner Nord Krauskopf's 43 career wins? Krauskopf, Krauskopf, excuse me. Yeah, tricky one. What driver accounted for 36 out of Nord Krauskopf's 43 career wins? I guess it's for Tiny London. A lot of Tiny Londons here tonight. Ned Jarrett, Bobby Isaac. The IndyCar mannequin. Yeah, there you go. What driver accounted for 36 out of owner Nord Krauskopf's 43 career wins? We got Isaac and Allison, the giant rubber duck. All righty, here we go. The answer is indeed Bobby Isaac, the 1970 Series champion. Bobby Isaac is correct. A lot of you got that one. Glenn 7000, looks like you're the first one too. All righty, well, with diecast questions coming up here, and when it is, you're going to have to be faster than Glenn 7000, it looks like. All righty, here we go. Let's see. No, that was too easy. We do need to see if we got another one. Okay. Let's see. Let me check here. Just want to make sure this one's correct. I'm not sure if it is. I am going to look this one up. Hang on here. Might have the diecast question here in just a moment. Okay. Yeah. All right. We do have our diecast question. Okay, here we go. So this is it. This one's for the Anthony Alfredo car here. So we're going to have this is a bonus round here for this one. And we'll have this question. So again, we're going to do a trivia question here. Whoever gets the answer right first in the chat room here will be the winner of this. And we will have that in just a moment. So let's get ready. Okay, here we go. So here it is for the Alfredo. What owner gave Donnie Allison the ride he drove to his first NASCAR Winston Cup win? Let me read it again. What owner gave Donnie Allison the ride he drove to his first NASCAR Winston Cup win? Go ahead and type it in the chat. First one here gets the Alfredo, gets the Tony Sauce. What owner gave Donnie Allison the ride he drove to his first NASCAR Winston Cup win? All righty, we got a few guesses coming in here. We got Haas Ellington. We got Moody. We got Junior Johnson. To his first. What owner gave Donnie Allison the ride he drove to his first NASCAR Winston Cup win? All right, since this was for the diecast, I'll wait a bit longer here for this. I'm going to hit the mute and let everybody else get a chance to have their answer to this. All right, I guess this is for Matthews, for Ellington. All righty. Okay, here we go. What owner gave Donnie Allison the ride he drove to his first NASCAR Winston Cup win? And the answer is Banjo Matthews. Banjo Matthews is the correct answer, and it looks like I see Braun Farms as the first one to guess it. You weren't the only one here. We got a couple more that guessed it as well. It was Banjo Matthews. So Braun Farms, congratulations. You are the winner of the Alfredo diecast. You can send me, if you have access to Twitter, you can send me a DM or you can send it to me by email. My email address is on the lastcard.info page there. So there you go. Yeah, that was a challenging one. I wanted to make it a nice hard one there too. But yes. Andrew Matthews. There we go. Let's make sure I saw that there correctly. So there you go. All righty. Okay, we'll do a couple more questions here for fun as well. So we'll go ahead and go from there. Yeah, Dirty Def, you got it as well there too. Correct. But yeah, first one there was yeah, just double checking here, just make sure I didn't miss anybody here. Yeah, I see Braun Farms is the first one here for Banjo Matthews. Alrighty, so let's get a couple more here. This team's category has been pretty rich here, so we got some good ones. Here we go. Here's a good one. Who was Derek Cope's crew chief when he won 2 races in 1990? There we go. That's a good one. Who was Derek Cope's crew chief when he won 2 races in 1990? Who was Derek Cope's crew chief when he won 2 races in 1990? There you go. If you checked out my book, you'd know the answer. Not the only source, of course, but yeah. Oh, I'm just seeing a replay. Basso488 putting up the video of from Josh Berry's on board. You get a much better idea of what was happening there with the Zane Smith Bubba Wallace accident. It's like Zane was getting kind of forced up there. Looks like by Reddick. I think it's Reddick. It looks like the McDonald's car here. By the way, another great paint scheme from today too. The Reddick paint scheme looked great in the video there. The ketchup scheme there, that was very well done. Alrighty, who was Derek Cope's crew chief when he won 2 races in 1990? The answer, of course, is Buddy Parrott. Buddy Parrott is the correct answer. No worries. JD's a lot longer than Cope, so a piece of metal. I could see how it would take a while to get through it for sure. I'm still getting through Dominic Aragon's book on Jeff Bodine. I very much enjoyed it. I'm going to do a review on the LastCar.info page as soon as I'm done with it here, but I've been just enjoying it these last few weeks here. It's a very good read. So there's a lot, the amount of books out there on driver biographies is doing very well right now. That's good to see. Let's see here. Buddy Parrott. Yeah. Who was the first one on that? I think we got a few. Let's see. Glenn 7000. I think you were the first one on that. Barry Dodson, very close. Buddy Parrott, yep. Yeah, Dodson was later. I think Dodson was 91. So good guess on that, Andrew. But yeah, Buddy Parrott was the one for 1990. Oh, was it 92? I guess it was 92. I guess that would make sense because, yeah, there was another year. See, I should know this. I'm getting too used to working on these other projects. But yeah, I know he was working his way over to Penske because he was really good with that. Alrighty. Oh, here we go. Here's a good one. I may make this one the last one for the evening here, folks. We got one more question here. This one again, just for fun. So here it is. Who drove for Terry Labonte on the Budweiser? Let's see. Yeah, on the Budweiser Chevy team for 2 races in 1987. Who drove for Terry Labonte in the Budweiser Chevy for 2 races in 1987? It actually worded it a little differently than that, but I think that made it a little bit too easy, so I'm going to just go with that. I want to see if there's anything else here I'm missing. Alrighty, here we go. Just a little bit. 87. Let me read that again. Which driver drove for Terry Labonte on the Budweiser Chevy team for 2 races in 1987? Huh. Let's see. We got guesses for Brett Bodine, Neil Bonnet, Kyle Petty, Jimmy Means. Oh, Laser Bro, yeah. Now, the Worth scheme does look kind of like an old Penske paint scheme. Yeah, it fits pretty well for their motif. They used to always have those kind of very futuristic looks to their cars and their haulers, too. Rusty Wallace's hauler in the early 90s looked pretty sick. Neil Bonnet, Ron Bouchard. We got several guesses here. Who drove for Terry Labonte on the Budweiser Chevy team for 2 races in 1987? Is the question. Alrighty, here we go. And the answer is Brett Bodine. Brett Bodine, well, Glenn 7000, nailed it. He got it again, man. I don't know how he does it. Glenn 7000 is the one. So, yeah, there you go. Brett Bodine is the correct answer. Driver that always seems to pop up in videos or whatever and shows up here again. I got to look that up here, too. I was looking at Terry's. I was thinking it was the way I was approaching it the wrong way when I was thinking about it. I was thinking it was as a relief driver, but Terry didn't miss any races in 87. So then I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. It must have been like as a sister car here or something. But I'm looking at Racing Reference. Yeah, there we go. I see a driver change at Wilkesboro here. It must have been in another race there, too. And he actually drove for Haas Ellington. I know Haas came up in the Donnie Allison question, but that was a team Donnie was more famous for driving for. But Joe Matthews goes back to his first win there. One of the last car Vengers. Yeah, there you go. Exactly. It's always one of the other parts of the stories here, too. All righty. I'll tell you what, well, I think that will probably about do it for the show here tonight. Again, congratulations to Denny Hamlin for pulling off the win today and Ryan Truex in yesterday's race. My Twitter feed is at LastCarOnBrock. My Patreon is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And, of course, the website is lastcar.info. Our next show is going to be next week sometime. I'm going to be, again, trackside at the Kansas Speedway, so please stay tuned to my social media there for more updates on that, as well as some pictures of the magnet along the way. We got 2 solid days of driving and heading out there, so it's going to be a bit of an adventure heading out there. But Last Bro and myself will be working our way out there and doing some coverage from that track for the first time. So that will be interesting. We'll do a show sometime after the race there, whether it's going to be that Sunday night or sometime afterwards. We're kind of leaving that up pretty much up in the air, but we'll find out there. And one way or the other, we'll get that going there too. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed the show here, and we will, we'll be in touch here from the action next week. And it's going to be a really exciting stretch of races here. We got Kansas next week here for that. We got the Throwback weekend at Darlington. We got the Wilkesboro race and the Indy 500 and Kyle Larson's bid at it not too long after that, along with the Coke 600. So, lots to cover, and we'll be talking about it here on the show here as well. So have a wonderful evening, everyone. Hope you had a great time here, and I will see you all next time.